Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to start this webinar by welcoming you all. We have a good number of participants in this webinar, more than 100 people, which is particularly good to know that we are talking to so many people. So, and also it's good to know that we can contribute to the advancement of knowledge in the advancement of knowledge in this so important topic of ethics, law, and artificial intelligence. So welcome all to this Católica Porto Business School event. I am here as Associate Dean for Research, Innovation and Sustainability, and my role is just opening this seminar. So I start by welcoming you, by thanking the organizers. The organizers is Helena Gonçalves, which is the coordinator of the Ethics Forum, and also Raquel Campos, which is a co-coordinator of the forum, and is going to be the moderator of this debate. And of course, finally, but not the least, to thank our keynote speakers for their availability to be with us today talking about these important topics. So Skeet is coming from, is the director of the Leadership Ethics at Markkula Center for Applied Ethics, and is going to talk to us a little bit about ethics and technology, in particular ChatGPT. Then Luís Pinto, which was actually a lecturer from Católica University, and is a specialist in education, technology, and sustainability, and works as a consultant in the area. And finally, Pedro Freitas, also a colleague from the Law School of Católica University, which is going to talk to us about the law perspective in terms of AI. Welcome to you all, and I would pass the floor to Helena now, who is going to introduce and show you a little bit more about the Forum Etica, which is the forum under which this seminar is being organized.
Thank you, Conceição. I will initiar video. Thank you, Conceição, for your introduction, for your presentation. And now I will very briefly presentation the Chief Ethics and Compliance Course Executive, because this is the open session of this course, but also the Ethics Forum. Okay, the main objectives of this course are four: identify the key issues of business ethics, learn about diversity and mechanisms and tools for promoting ethics, and also develop the skills needed to manage ethical performance. Learn to support the construction of an organization ethical culture is the four objectives of this course. We are a conceptual framework for all the course of these areas, because we need to know that ethics and compliance are very different, but they need to do, they are two complementary but mutual reinforcing areas, and this our conceptual framework of all of our course in this domain. Our programs are 4 fundamentals areas. Of course, the fundamentals of ethics, it's essential. The current and future ethical challenges, this webinar, it's a part of these fundamentals of ethics. And then ethical performance management tools are the main the main course of the main areas. There are more time of this fundamental area. Competence for ethics management, namely models of deliberation of ethical decision making and mediation management conflicts, are some topics of this area. And ethical leadership and building space of ethical reflections are some topics of ethical organization culture. This course is a transdisciplinary and holistic approach, both theoretical and practice. There we are lecturers specializing and business experts. These business experts are mainly members of Ethics Forum, and we have some individual support for the final projects of the students. All the students have access to Ethics at Work survey, and also the Shared Mentoring Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer program, a new program on this area. About the forum, we have 70 members and 42 organizations, and we have now 6 sponsors. They contribute to support all our main activities. Our main activity, the forum ethics, it's for purpose promoting business ethics through the exchanges of experience, joint reflections, and the creations and sharing of knowledge. Our main regular activities are 3 regular sessions along the year, annual study, and we have this study present in the public conference in the October, November, in the end of the year. We have also other things like celebration of Global Ethics Day. We have ethics forum collections with our books, collective books. And now this year we started with research notes. Here the first research note about how the codes of ethics conduct of the company listed in PSI in Portugal are compared with those of the companies of FTSE, and we are very proud about this new research note area. So now we want to hear our guests. So please, Raquel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I welcome all of you present in this online conference, and not only students but also public interested in this relevant topic of artificial intelligence. In fact, developments in AI are already causing great changes in society, and they will certainly cause in the future even more unimaginable outcomes. So the question for us is, and for the panel in general, is if we wanted to follow AI to follow its own course, or if you really want to engage with AI and find the best ways to control its impacts and direct its use to the better uses of in order to improve humanity's and planet Earth future. So that is what brings us here. You will see here a presentation with the lens of ethics, a lens also of technology, and the lens of law. So AI will be approached through these 3 perspectives. And of course that these 3 perspectives are going to intersect in these presentations with our guests. So Welcome, Anne, Luis, and Pedro, and thank you so much for having accepted our invitation to be here, and also for your willingness to share your knowledge and your reflections. It is a pleasure to have you. So we're going to start with Anne. Anne Skeet was already briefly introduced. She will share a presentation under the theme How ChatGPT is Reviving Interests in Ethics. And Anne is the Senior Director of the Leadership Ethics at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University in the United States. She has been leading for at least a decade in the center programs in business and leadership ethics, and exploring also the ethical dilemmas faced by leaders and followers. So Anne will be our keynote speaker, and then she will be followed by Luís Pinto. Luís will focus on the issue of technology, and you will speak about AI and technology and focusing on platforms and systems. And as you have heard, Luís is a consultant in Edtech and Sustainability in San Francisco, the US. And he has been for more than 20 years growing international businesses operating in the global education landscape. Finally, we will have Pedro. And Pedro Freitas is our colleague in Católica University. He's from the School of Law. And he has already given us the pleasure to participate in previous sessions. Pedro is a member of the Law and Artificial Intelligence Research Group at Católica University, and is also a lecturer and researcher at Católica Global School of Law. You will be sharing about the latest developments in AI regulation. So thank you once again, Anne, Luis, and Pedro. I'm asking you to try to fit in the allocated time slots, more or less. 20 minutes for Anne and 10 minutes for Luis, and then 10 minutes for Pedro. And finally, I ask all participants to put your questions in the chat as the speeches are made, so that in the end, we can select some of the questions for the discussion. So let's move on then. Thank you, Anne, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raquel. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here so that I can walk through some slides on my presentation. Here we go. See if there we go. Wonderful. And as Raquel said, I'm going to speak a little bit about how ChatGPT is reviving interest in ethics. And of course, ethics is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've been at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics for the past 10 years. And the Markkula Center has existed since 1986. And we have a forum very similar to the one that you have at your school, where we bring together business leaders to talk about matters of ethics in regular sessions. And in one of those sessions, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was speaking with one of the people who comes to the session. He was the general counsel for several high-profile Silicon Valley companies, which is where the Markkula Center is based. And he also sits on a number of boards for different corporations. And I was talking to him and suggesting that he put ethics on the agenda for one of the boardroom discussions. And he said to me, Anne, if I put ethics on the agenda, I would get laughed out of the boardroom. And so that was really the point of view at that point in time. But what a difference a chatbot can make. Because of course, now everybody is talking about ethics as it relates to AI. And these are just some of the headlines from news outlets in Portugal and in the United States that show you how much this has risen to the forefront of people's consciousness. And you know, it's definitely a hot topic when people are writing academic papers about it, as this one is about the portrayal of ethical issues of AI in the media. And it's also captured the public's attention. And so at the Markkula Center, we conducted a survey at the end of last year just to get a sense of how people are feeling about AI. We talked to 3,000 people, adults, and here are some of the things, some of the reactions they had. 66% of them, 2/3, were concerned with AI's impact on humanity. 82% said that they cared that AI is ethical. 86% believe technology companies should be regulated.
And 70%, this is just a few months ago, 70% believe that companies should temporarily stop developing AI to allow time to consider its impact on society. 55%, over half, believe that AI companies are not considering ethics when developing AI. So you get a sense that the broader public has a lot of reservations about artificial intelligence. And part of the reason for that is something that I call the AI accountability gap. And this is just the concept that when AI is making decisions, that human beings are not comfortable with that yet. They really are seeking ways to hold machines accountable in the same way that we hold humans accountable. When a human being makes a mistake or does something awful, there are consequences or a rule of law to hold them accountable. But how do we hold machines to account? And what we're seeing is a heightening of ethical standards for AI applications. There's a couple of examples I can give you that sort of illustrate this. One is Cruise, which is a self-driving car company in the United States based in the Bay Area. And they had an incident where 12 of their cars were involved in accidents and sort of didn't behave as they were expected to behave, just 12. And when you compare that to the number of accidents that cars that are driven by human beings have, it's really a very low number. But that was enough for Cruise to pull its entire fleet of cars off the road, to lay off a number of employees related to that withdrawal. They're now facing 2 federal investigations, and the CEO of the organization has had to resign, and he was the founder of the company. So that's one example of where you're seeing people have a higher standard because AI is being used, in that case, for self-driving cars than when it's not being used. Another place we're seeing people express a lot of reservations is when AI is being used in human resource applications. So it would be the case that many of us have had the experience of hiring people, but never been asked to justify, why did we hire that person, or why did we not hire somebody else? But when you're using artificial intelligence, there is an expectation that those decisions will be explained. And part of this AI accountability gap is why I wrote with several other colleagues a book called Ethics in the Age of Disruptive Technologies. We did this through the Institute for Technology, Ethics, and Culture, which is at the Markkula Center. And in this book, we explored the implications of bringing technologies online and looked at best practices for how to do that responsibly. So one of the organizations that we collaborated with was the World Economic Forum. And we did a series of research projects with them. One where we looked at 25 companies and how they integrate ethics into their organizational culture. And then we did case studies on Salesforce, IBM, and Microsoft. We also did a research project at the Markkula Center in 2017 that looked specifically at ethical culture. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And then we work regularly with companies where we are asked to come in and consult to them. And so drawing on all of those sources, the work we did with the World Economic Forum, our own primary research, and then the work that we do with companies, we were able to get a sense of what are some of the best practices that we're seeing around developing responsible technology ethically. And that's what we share in the book. So what we learned and what we talk about in the book is how to close that accountability gap. And we looked at a couple different, I've learned a couple different ways to do that. One is in cultivating an ethical culture. Another is in providing leadership that invests in humanity. The third is using responsible technology principles to guide the work. And then the fourth is how you take those principles and actually apply them into practice. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. First, just a word about culture. Culture has a number of different elements to it. I like to use this visual of the iceberg because it shows you the pieces of culture that are easy to see, that are sort of above the waterline, to use the iceberg analogy. And then there are some elements of culture that are below the waterline, harder to see. And you need a healthy mix of these cultural elements in order for ethics to be used in your company. So the first is structural elements. Those are things like the organization chart and the human resource practices of the company. The other is declarative elements, mission, vision, values, things that companies say about themselves, like their code of conduct or taglines like move fast and break things, or do no evil, some of the ones that have been popularized in Silicon Valley. Below the waterline are symbolic elements, and that can be things like, what do people wear to work? What stories get told in the organization, and who gets held up as an exemplar? And the other last category are the normative elements, and those are the beliefs in the organization, the implicit standards, the taboos that, you know, if you cross them, there would be a sanction that you would get in trouble for. And as I say, our research discovered that if you have a healthy mix of these cultural elements, it's more likely for ethics to be used in your organization. If you lean just too heavily on one of them, then it's less so. The other thing that we identified were 3 conditions that cause, when they are present, it's more likely for ethics to pervade the organization, to be used in everyday decision-making. The first condition is this sense of responsibility to society, that the company acknowledges that it impacts society and is in turn, influenced by society. The second is a respect for moral autonomy and a climate of mutual trust and understanding. And this looks like decentralized decision-making in the organization, and also, a comfort level in terms of people feeling like they can bring issues forward when they have concerns. And the last area is ethical deliberation, a set of practices around how you make decisions in the organization. And this looks like using data to make decisions, considering the people who are affected, and including them in the decision-making process whenever possible, thinking about the downstream effects of the decisions that are being made, and then once the decision's been made, sharing the motivations that come from those decisions that, were behind those decisions, to the extent that you can. So as I say, we looked at culture as one aspect of what we approached and learned from companies and applied in the book that we put together. And the book goes through a series of stages, and we use the analogy of a journey to help people think about these stages. The first is a commitment, a decision to take the trip, to go on the journey. And this is leadership deciding to make responsible technology a strategic initiative in the company. The second phase is one of rigorous self-assessment. This is when you look at your culture and you test to see if you have those conditions that I just mentioned and other aspects of ethical culture. The third stage is thinking about where you want to go. And this is developing a responsible technology framework. The fourth stage, you're now on the journey, you're implementing that framework and embedding ethics into the product development practices of your company. And you're also going back and taking the things that you learned in that second stage of rigorous self-assessment, and you're addressing them. So if you found that you didn't have the conditions necessary to bring ethics forward in your company, then you're taking steps to create them. And the last stage is one of continuous improvement and measurement, so that you are sure year over year that you're continuing to manage your technology products through their life cycle in a way that's ethical and responsible. I'm going to talk just briefly about one of those stages, leadership, discernment, and direction, which is the first stage. And this is really the idea that at the board level and in the C-suite, there's a commitment, as I said, to responsible technology as a strategic initiative of the company. This looks like identifying a tech ethics champion and drafting and sharing a tech ethics policy statement with the organization. And more companies than you might expect are struggling to identify this level of leadership and make this commitment. Here's a quote from the CEO of Accenture, Julie Sweet, and she says, literally every meeting I go to with the CEO, I ask the question, who in your organization is responsible for responsible AI? And can they tell you when you call where AI is being used, what the risks are, and how they're being monitored? And right now, it's about a 90% hit that they don't have that person. Leadership, of course, is responsible for managing risks, and the risks of AI are significant, and they're in all these different categories. And those categories across the top line are categories that we're used to managing, but it's the ones across the bottom line that have become more important in this age of AI. Reputational risk, environmental risk, human risk, and other ethical risks. And again, just focusing on that bottom line, you can see the kinds of specific risks that are coming up in each of those areas. So in the area of reputational risk, it might be that the AI is behaving counter to the company's values. In the area of environmental risk, that it's using too much water or energy. And in the area of human risk, that there's customer and employee alienation. Other ethical risks, of course, are bias in AI systems, which have been talked about in a lot of media coverage. And so I'm going to focus just for a minute on the human risk and point you to a resource that we developed several years ago to try and help leaders think about those human risks. We did this in partnership with another organization, the Partnership on AI. It's actually their document, and I was a co-author on the paper, which brings forward a set of tools for leaders to think about as AI is becoming more prevalent in the workplace. We wanted to look at how the workforce was impacted by AI and what steps leaders could take to manage that. We identified 6 domains of well-being, and we offered tools like a worker survey for assessing that impact of AI on workforce well-being. These were the 6 domains that we identified, and we made a set of recommendations in each area for managers to consider. And these are some of the sample recommendations that come along with that framework. And in the first category, the area of human rights, one of the recommendations was that companies come up with a process of value alignment. And that's exactly what we talk about in the iTech handbook. And we've seen that a number of companies are developing a set of principles that they're using to guide their work. And so if you look at just one example, here are 2 companies, IBM and Microsoft, and you see the principles that they're using. IBM calls them pillars, Microsoft calls them principles, and you see a lot of overlap between the 2 companies. But that's actually should be reassuring because it means that there are some standards that are evolving in the industry that are becoming norms. And we've developed our own set of principles as part of the iTech handbook to help companies that might just be getting started in this area. We actually recommend identifying a single anchoring principle that is tied closely to the organization's mission, vision, and values. And the anchoring principle that we use is that our actions are for the common good of humanity and the environment. And then we break down that anchoring principle into iTech's guiding principles to 7 more principles that we walk through and that we use to guide the work is part of our responsible technology framework that we developed as, an example through those 5 stages that we outline in the book. And in each one of these areas, we break it down even further so that you can get a better sense of what's going on. And when you look at our list, you don't maybe see some of the same words that you saw on the IBM and the Microsoft list, except down here in maintain accountability. And then as you get to transparency and explainability, you're starting to see some of the same words that they used. But you have to go deeper in our list before you start to run into some more familiar words. So this is how we break down respect, human dignity, and rights. And as you can see, there's a lot of elements to that. And one of the things that we learned in the work that we did and the research we've done is that companies that are more successful in developing technology responsibly are taking the time to get this specific and to actually define what they mean by their principles. So this is how we break down respect for human dignity and rights. And this is when we talk about promote human well-being, it covers all of these aspects. And it's one of the things that we're seeing that companies are maybe struggling to do. They first define the principle at a very high level, but they don't take time to break it down to this degree of detail. Our next principle is investing in humanity, and that includes things like building good institutions and using long-term thinking. Promoting justice, access, diversity, equity, and inclusion includes things like fair economic conditions and inclusion and non-discrimination. Recognizing that Earth is for all life really points to the importance of environmental sustainability. And that's one of the challenges in these early days of AI is just how much energy and water AI is using. We talk about maintaining accountability, and it's not just corporate accountability, but also individual, user, and government accountability, as well as risk and compliance. And our last guiding principle is promoting transparency and explainability. And again, we break it down into a number of, detailed description of what we mean when we say that. Things like transparency and trustworthiness and simplicity, using fact-based decision-making, having an openness on process and decision-making and human oversight, interpretability of the models that are being used, reporting status and progress, and feedback channels for explanation. So those are all the things that go into promoting transparency and explainability. So what I've showed you here is that we're encouraging companies to get one layer more specific, but we actually want them to get 2 layers more specific, because we want them to not only go through these into this level of detail to define the principle, but then to think about how the company would actually apply and use that principle in making decisions. So here in the area of human dignity and rights are just some examples of the kind of action principles, which is what we call them, that could be developed in this realm. The first is selecting and developing AI models that have consistent performance. Or you might develop data storage guidelines to make sure that you have accurate privacy and confidentiality of the data that you're using. You could develop an AI concern escalation process, for example, having a separate hotline for AI-related issues. And you could provide mechanisms for end users to appeal an AI system's decision. So those are, again, just examples of how you can take the principle at the high level, respect for human dignity and rights, define it in specifying principles, and then put it into action in these action principles. You also need some metrics, some ways to measure what you're doing. We talk about this in the 5th stage of our process in the iTech journey. And again, these are just some examples under the first 2 categories, the first 2 principles that we use in the book. Respect for human dignity and rights. You could measure how many data privacy breaches you have. You could keep track of and report on an AI model's accuracy performance, since we know hallucinations and inaccuracy are a concern that a lot of people have around AI. You could share the number of AI-related decision appeals that you receive in the company and what their outcomes are. In the area of promoting human well-being, you could report on the number of jobs lost, the numbers or created, the number of employees that are retrained for other work, and the number of employees retrained to do AI augmented work. You could share the number of incidences that are involving difficulties or loss of control of AI systems. And you could also, if you did one of those worker surveys about the integration of AI in the workplace, you could share those results. So again, these are just examples to give you an idea of the kind of work that we're seeing in companies that are having the most success with employing technology and specifically AI responsibly. So you put all that together and then you have a response to the AI accountability gap. And what this looks like is companies starting to accept higher ethical standards for decisions made by AI systems, companies that can create the conditions in their culture that encourage the use of ethics, those that are identifying leadership for responsible technology and orienting leaders to deal with the human risks in organizations, and finally developing a set of principles, making them specific, actionable, and measurable. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to the conversation with our colleagues, and I will turn it over to Luís for him to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you, Anne. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you, Católica, for inviting me to be at this forum. So I'm based in San Francisco, the same as Anne, and I want to bring a provocative approach to this conversation today. Basically, because technology became the new electricity, and we look at AI as the next frontier that will challenge all of us along the way. And as you heard from Anne, there are a lot of companies working on the good side of technology and trying to create mechanisms that allows them to be within a certain range of activity. It doesn't mean that all the players follow that model, and that's the concern we should have. And I'm glad that I'm speaking before Pedro, which will come with the legal side perspective as well here, because one of the things is really accountability. And I'll give you an example to frame my conversation here. I started programming when I was 15, and I was living in Portugal, and I was coding software since then. And even today, when I have a look at my phone and I think about the applications that I install on my phone, I have a hard time reading all the terms and conditions, reading all the data sharing notices, reading all the privacy, and finding that in most cases, like eventually many of you, I have no option than to say yes if I want to use it. Do I have an alternative when I want to say no to a certain application? Sometimes I don't. And then you look at another thing that happened in the past 10 years, mostly when you look at something called the cookies, which are very famous, and we shouldn't need them on our technology. But basically, you know, our data is being spread to people that we are not aware of. There are efforts like in the European Union, which has the strongest protection about cookies for advertising, where there is a regulation that has some effectiveness and penalties for people that don't respect that. But if you think about other parts of the world, when you are traveling and you need to install something, or you need to go to a website, you don't actually know who you are surrendering your data to. And AI is going to take this to another extreme. And you have to keep in mind that, again, like in the application in your mobile phone, when something goes wrong, the technology companies typically, even if they acknowledge, they say, I am sorry, but their repair method is to provide an update to the application, is not to really be accountable to all the impact that eventually they had. So on another front, when you think about data, and AI will take this to an extreme level, is the issue of security. So if someone breaches the data of your medical records, can you imagine that somebody else has access and will start selling that data? This is already a reality that happened across many systems. And this is where, how do you ensure that platforms within your health provider range are protecting you from any of those breaches? And what AI will bring is an exponential layer of data being crossed between platforms, and eventually one of those breaches can take it to another level. So when you think about platforms, and that's why I mentioned platforms and systems within this topic here today for you, it's also the inequality of the response from the different blocks that you have with major organizations developing this kind of technology. If you think about what the European Union is trying to do as a bloc, compared to the OECD that has additional layers with additional countries, what the US is doing, and then on the other side, what China may bring to the market. We don't see a uniform approach. There is no coherent action for this. And in one way, we are having the options in a few companies as of today. And one of the key reasons is not only the technology platforms that are supporting all of this, but also the massive data that is needed to actually feed the artificial intelligence models. So you need a lot of data to be crunched by those machines to provide relevant results in the tools that we see today available to us. So when you think about the options and who's going to be able to provide such services, this is now concentrated on big companies in the US market. There are a lot of movements, of course, in China, which we don't have enough data to comment at this stage, but they will become a contender. And what actually we see, and it might be particularly important for you in the scenario of being in Portugal and in Europe, is Europe is lagging behind on this race for artificial intelligence because there are no clear platform winners in Europe that will be able to host that kind of data. So what will be the option for us to cooperate with other players that will provide us access to these solutions? And what role can we play in terms of scrutinizing, the models that they use, scrutinizing the actions, and understanding what is the accountability involved in such practices, establishing new principles, like Anne was saying about the discussion in the boardroom of what people want to do. And, you know, for a while, when you think about ethics not entering the technology conversation at the boardroom, this is a reality in places like Silicon Valley. Some years ago, a famous investor mentioned that Silicon Valley should leave the United States and become free of any governance imposed by any authority. And the issue here from some groups of people is feeling that legislation and regulation is slowing down the innovation pace that we could have on the scientific front. So if you think about that, people discussing creating islands of nations that would be independent, you know, if you consider that when you go on a cruise, the law that is in fact applicable to what happens to a ship in the high seas out of any local jurisdiction is the law of the ship's commander. So there are people here in the technology and investment areas that believe that we should be free from all those restrictions and just have free research. So that's a dangerous concept, of course, that a lot of people don't agree. And I don't think that we would go to that scenario quite easily. But we have to understand that artificial intelligence can lead to consequences of creating models that will be running without a lot of supervision. And at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, who's going to be blamed for it, and who's going to be assuming the responsibility that we have here? So governments are creating principles, and for sure Pedro will talk a bit more about this. But the idea of protecting discrimination, the safe use of the technology and the data, prevent abusive data breaches, the right to know what AI is doing, which is also very interesting. If you go back to the cookies example that I gave you at the beginning, or even the applications on your phone, people claiming to want the right to know what the artificial intelligence technology is doing with our data is something that may not be compatible with the business space in technology. So this idea also of sharing resources, when you think about open systems, which is a very common topic within technology, open source can allow things to scale more rapidly and cost effective, but at the same time, they are more open to better use of technology, as we have examples today with a lot of data breaches, cryptocurrencies, and a lot of that. So when you think about proprietary, on the other hand, we are dependent on a few companies to license with their business model the way they want. So we're going to be having trade-offs, as always, whenever we bring innovation through technology, where we face the challenge of adopting something new, doing a transition to such new model, and we will be paying the price for being the pioneers, for sure, while these models are adjusting. And at the same time, we may not have any capacity to intervene and enhance the models or even prevent them from producing any harm. Anne was mentioning, and I care a lot about sustainability, and Anne was mentioning something for the common good that needs to be the work of any business. Yes, that it's a nice principle, and we all focus on creating that opportunity for everybody and for the planet to be in harmony, but it doesn't mean that this is what businesses do. Businesses today in AI are in a race for competitiveness, in a race for being first in disrupting the market, and disrupting meaning some of those trade-offs will have an impact on someone that is left behind. So I think it's important to have more of these conversations, and people that can participate in the discussion groups, people that are within regulation frameworks should contribute to see how at the local level we can ensure that whatever is available can be applied with a certain criteria and has a transparency for us to be able to intervene whenever it's possible. One thing is for sure, and I'll end where I started, technology is the new electricity. We don't run our lives today without technology in some form being available. When you think about AI, it's really a new frontier that has a long way to go. But already now at the design level, we have to make sure that we are taking care of the principles that matter to us, and we don't abdicate of our values to make sure that within each culture, the use that we bring from such technologies is acceptable from what we believe is the well-being of all of us. So looking forward for the conversation at the end, and I'll pass it on to Pedro. Thank you.
Thank you. I will share a PowerPoint. Very provocative intervention of my colleague. I will present some of the latest developments on AI regulation. We know that AI is transforming our society. We have witnessed impressive technological advancements in the field of AI, and these advancements have brought to life ideas that once were considered fictional, but nowadays they are reality. The benefits are immense. The benefits to society are immense and vast, and can be seen in various areas such as education or medicine, even in self-driving cars, as it has been mentioned a few moments ago. But there are risks. There are important risks that derive from the usage of AI. So it is of utmost importance to have proper legal regulation that safeguards the fundamental rights of individuals, and also tries to address some of the risks and challenges posed by artificial intelligence. Some of the risks are these ones, risks concerning privacy violations or bias and discrimination, where AI algorithms perpetuate and amplify societal biases, or even safety and control issues that could lead to existential risks and the end of mankind. So the risks and the ethical and moral considerations are extremely important and demand a response from the different countries. So different countries have adopted different approaches. So we have countries that have a wait and see approach. They do not want to curtail innovation in the field of AI, so they do not have any legal regulation imposed or thought of. But there are others here that I mentioned that have been advancing in terms of regulation. One of the pioneers in implementing a comprehensive set of laws or regulations concerning AI and algorithms is China. The provisions foreseen by China pertain to deep synthesis, regulation, generative AI, or even ethical reviews measures. So China, despite different look that we could have towards China, China is one of the pioneers in providing for provisions or regulations concerning AI. In the United States, there are several relevant initiatives, namely a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, some executive orders, namely an executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence, and more recently a memorandum that also tackles some of the issues concerning artificial intelligence. At an international level, we see also some advancements from the United Nations with a very recent resolution on artificial intelligence, and also the Council of Europe that is trying to come up with a framework convention on AI, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. So all of these countries and also international institutions, they perceive these ethical, moral, or safety concerns, and so they are proposing regulation and regulatory oversight. But I will dedicate a bit of my my intervention to the European Union and the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act. The EU Act is not recent, so the history of the EU Artificial Intelligence Act dates back to 2021 with the first proposal of the AI Act by the European Commission, and we saw advancements and setbacks in terms of the final wording of the Artificial Intelligence Act. And basically, we are at a point where the European Parliament approved the latest version of the Artificial Intelligence Act. So we're in the imminence of having the final Artificial Intelligence Act being published and also have its entry into force. Looking at the EU Act, we see that this legal document tries to strike a balance between AI innovation and also the protection of fundamental rights. But one of the criticisms that we have been reading and hearing about the EU AI Act is the fact that it's focusing, according to some, too much on the protection of fundamental rights and curtailing AI innovation. Well, it is a position that the EU took that was thought about, right? So there was a possibility of only striving advancements in technology, but that would put at risk fundamental rights, the core values of the European Union. So the challenge posed to the EU is to strike this balance, try to improve the internal market functioning by fostering the circulation and innovation of AI systems, but at the same time, provide regulation that gives people the knowledge that they will be protected against harmful effects from using and developing artificial intelligence. One idea that I stress here or underline here from the EU AI Act is the fact that AI should be seen as a human-centric technology. So technology or a system that should increase human well-being. So the ultimate objective should not be technological advancement in itself or economic development in itself, but rather providing better conditions for humankind. And how does the EU AI Act tries to strike this balance? By using a risk-based approach. So across the Act, we see that the EU provides different regulations or different conditions or duties according to the level of risks posed to human rights or to fundamental rights. These risks and duties are to be ascertained regardless of the specific area in which AI is going to be applied. So, or the different sector in which AI is going to be applied. So it is a horizontal regulatory approach to AI that tries to give this protection to fundamental rights without completely hindering AI innovation. And the different risk levels are this one. So we have at the top of the pyramid, unacceptable risks. So systems that create risks that should not be tolerable in the EU, they are prohibited. Examples found here are the subliminal manipulation using AI systems or general social scoring are some of the risks unacceptable. And then we have high risks, limited risks, namely risks concerning the usage of deepfakes or generative AI, and also minimal risks. And this regulation is imposed with the threat of a non-compliance sanction that can go up to 35 million euros or 7% of worldwide annual turnover, whichever is higher. Another relevant and interesting provision found in the Act has to do with regulatory sandboxes. So regulatory sandboxes are basically controlled frameworks in which providers of AI can develop, train, or test AI systems, even in real-world conditions, under supervision, under regulatory supervision. So it is a tool that tries to give the conditions to have the development of AI without this development being done without any kind of restriction or any kind of supervision. Okay? Finally, because I have also almost gone over the 10 minutes that were attributed to me, the final mention I want to make here has to do with a new office that is being created in the EU that is called the European Artificial Intelligence Office, which will be of utmost importance in the field of AI in the European Union, because it's going to support the AI Act, enforce some of the rules, also cooperate with institutions, experts, and stakeholders, and basically try to foster the development of AI, but AI that is trustworthy and has this human-centric approach. So, of course, this approach of the EU is not exempt from criticism, but I think it is a balanced approach that tries to foster AI at the same time that does not neglect the need to protect other fundamental rights that are ethical concerns that we as Europeans are concerned about. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Pedro and Luís and Anne, for your challenging and very interesting presentations. I think that we have here lots of content to launch the discussion among you three. It's interesting to see that each of you has focused on different levels of thinking about the implications, the risks and the challenges of AI. And I would say that, and starting from the last intervention, so Pedro was focused on the level of legislation in regions, namely the case in more detail of Europe. So there's a level of accountability that the countries have a role to play concerning what companies are doing and how they are using AI. And Luís, interestingly, Luís also talked about the role of companies, and also talked about the perspective of AI in terms of us as individuals and what we can do to protect ourselves. But in both cases, Pedro and Luís, you mentioned the issue of regulation. And I know that this was kind of a challenge that you launched, but it is until a certain point, it is also true that regulation is slowing down advancements in technology, and you both mentioned these. And shared with us something very interesting, which is the work that you've been developing at Markkula Center regarding guiding principles concerning the use of AI, and how companies can think and work with implications of AI inside doors. So we have here at least 3 levels of thinking and reflection. And I would start with Anne, and then I would invite Pedro and Luís also to participate in this question. So, and you shared with us a set of guiding principles that companies, especially tech companies, can use when wanting to start to work about the ethical implications of artificial intelligence inside doors. And you jumped from principles to action principles, and then to metrics. And so all these that you shared in your view is something that is a way to work, especially inside technological companies, and how can these also be used and also relevant to companies that, not being tech, also will also have to deal with AI. So is this plastic enough to be used to all kind of companies, or this is specifically for tech companies?
Well, you make a good observation, which is that no company is going to be able to avoid artificial intelligence. So even companies that don't think of themselves as technology companies are going to have to think about what principles they want to be applying if they end up, if their vendors are using artificial intelligence, or if they know that consumers are interacting with their products using artificial intelligence. So I think none of us are going to be able to escape the implications of choices that other people might be making around implementing AI in the way that it impacts our organizations. So yeah, I think it's important to point out that we wrote the book actually before ChatGPT was launched. So really to look more broadly at responsible technology principles, not just artificial intelligence, although the work that we did can be applied to artificial intelligence as well. And I think our primary goal was to try and give companies some tools and some level of agency, that they don't need to wait for regulation, particularly in the United States, where we've had a fairly ineffective Congress and an inability to pass a lot of legislation lately. It's been, I think, a lot of companies are sort of waiting for the phrase that we would use as the other shoe to drop. What is going to happen when the regulation starts to come online in the United States? And so rather than wait for that moment and sort of in a stage of helplessness, this is really a set of principles and practices that companies can decide, I'm going to make a commitment to developing technology responsibly, regardless of what the technological regulations are. And I can do it in a way that's consistent with my own mission in my own organization.
I would like to following on this. So all that you shared starts from the principle that businesses should be for the common good, in the sense that that's the basic principle of ethics. And so we had here Pedro and Luís challenging this sentence, this idea that maybe businesses are not for the common good. And Luís was very verbal about this. So Luís, aren't business for the common good? And then I would like Anne to react.
Yeah, again, the principles are there, and we have a long history of creating businesses, and our language about social responsibility comes far along. But the point is, when you think about the nature of the economic market and financial markets, last year, the biggest part of venture capital investment was in AI. Can we assume that all that investment was channeled to people that will behave responsibly? In some cases, they may have the intentions, but they can disrupt the markets by launching solutions that will have problems along the way. How do they repair those problems? So Pedro was talking about the European Union putting high levies on companies that go beyond the norms that the bloc is creating. And we have a historic set of investigations against companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft. This is not new. This is the same approach. But when you think about venture capital, we're talking about investment in thousands of small startups, and they won't be known as in terms of their size to these kinds of authorities to come after them and chase them and find them. So one of the issues is the broad acceptance of the community within technology that we are creating something that we cannot predict where it will end. And this is a new wave of technology. One of the things that I mentioned when I started is I did computer programming when I was a teenager. And at the time, we had instructions that were based on language. We had to learn the specific languages. Today, these machines, they are coding between each other in a network. They are coding with no language that we can understand. They are coding within numbers at such a level of data that no human being can actually look at that data and take a decision. So this is also about unleashing a new range of power within these machines to actually produce an impact on our daily lives. And again, we go back to the issue, the basic issue of security. You know, when we share our data with an organization, are we sure that they have the best systems that are protected against any rupture? And from there, you can imagine what will be the spiral effect that this can have when you have machines wrongly taking your data out to somebody else that shouldn't have access to it. So this is one side of it. The intention is there. I don't believe that people build businesses to do harm, but when something goes wrong, who's going to be accountable for that? That's one of the issues about regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and what can you share with us of what you sense and you hear and you know about what is being discussed in the boardrooms?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, Luís makes a great point, which is nobody goes to work every day saying, I want to do harm. I want to do something bad that's going to negatively impact people. And in fact, in Silicon Valley and in, you know, a lot of leadership circles that I've been part of, people are always talking about how they're introducing products in the service of humanity and trying to, you know, they're going to make the world a better place. And so it's always comes from a place of good intentions, or largely comes from a place of good intentions, and yet still things go wrong. And so that's why we see the importance of using things like principle-based reasoning when you are bringing technologies online as a way of developing some self-restraint in these organizations and, you know, moving more prudently and cautiously with technology that's as powerful as what Luís just described, which is, you know, we don't even understand the programming that's going on between the two systems that might be talking to each other. And that's a problem. So there was a great academic paper that a couple of scholars at the University of Pennsylvania wrote in, I think it was in 2015. And they asked people to fill in the analogy as, you know, as law is to justice and medicine is to health, business is to blank. In other words, what is the purpose of business? And they went around and polled a lot of people, and they came up with an answer that only academics could love, possibly, because their answer was optimized collective value, which does not roll off the tongue like justice or health. But if you think about what that's really saying, optimized collective value, it is an attempt to capture this concept of the common good, that it is something that serves all of us, and not just any one subset of humanity, but all of humanity. And I think that's the struggle that we're seeing. There's a subset that's very engaged with and excited about the potential of AI, which is vast. The potential is clearly there, and the positive effects it can have are there. But you still have to be thinking about how quickly you're moving and how you're bringing those capabilities online. And if they are harming other people, then you have to acknowledge that harm. And I think ultimately the companies have to be held accountable for what their AI systems are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the challenges is, in fact, is that about AI, we really have extreme difficulty in understanding what lies ahead. And one of the questions of the people that are listening to us is that, and I would direct it to Pedro, is how can we, well, and starting from a very general perspective about regulation, then we can go deep into more details, but the question is, how can we regulate what we in fact don't know? So how does it work?
Well, of course it is difficult. We're discussing an area that is transforming every day, is changing its shape every day. But for us lawyers or even politicians, we have to look ahead and see what we do not want for our communities, right? So if we know that AI, has shown the risks of bias and discrimination, has shown risks related with job displacement, etc. There are a number of risks and concerns that legal regulation can, from today, try to tackle, right? We do not know if there's going to be a general artificial intelligence, something like the Terminator of Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's, of course, looking at from today, it's science fiction, but we do not know. This artificial intelligence moves at a very fast pace, and law not as fast. So I think the EU Act and also the other regulations provided by China, the United States, etc., they are trying to regulate basically the risks that we are aware of right now, and to a certain extent, not try to shape the development of artificial intelligence, right? So not to have this beast that is being developed without any kind of control, but rather try to shape its development so that at the end, artificial intelligence can serve as an instrument to have better conditions for humankind. That's where we can have this collision between some companies and also the countries, where companies, some try to strive for profit, right? Or as we have seen, some companies try to reach a general artificial intelligence without giving too much thought on what that general artificial intelligence could mean to the future of humankind.
Mm. And do you observe any kind of convergence in regulation among the various blocks that you mentioned, blocks and countries that you mentioned? So can we and view in the future some kind of unique regulatory framework for the whole humanity?
There are very few subject matters that are important and consensual enough so that we have an international convention. Even in terrorism, we do not have international convention of terrorism. So, of course, we have been discussing about the possibility of having an artificial intelligence convention or regulation with its a global application. But I think it's going to be extremely difficult. I think that the path is, as someone already mentioned here in the comments, namely here, someone mentioning the ISO standards. Of course, ISO standards are extremely important. There are at least 3 that have to do with artificial intelligence: the ISO 42001 and the ISO 23894, the ISO 23053. But my hopes are more on the framework convention of the Council of Europe. That we shouldn't be fooled by the name Council of Europe, because even in previous conventions related with other topics, we have had countries from other geographical regions that adopted or they took part in the conventions. For instance, the Convention on Cybercrime, we have the United States, we have Japan, Brazil as signatory countries. So if the Council of Europe is able to reach this convention on AI and try to give overarching kind of regulation that tries to meet the needs for AI innovation, but at the same time, the respect for the human rights, the enshrined in the Convention of Human Rights of the Council of Europe, I think that will be a great step forward in terms of the future of regulation of AI, not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe.
Thank you, Pedro. Luís, I was wondering, you mentioned that people have the right to know what AI is doing. And what is your take on the power of people, of common people, of users in this AI universe? So can we hope for each of us to have some way of defending ourselves and having some voice regarding the risks associated with AI?
Well, that's a great question. If we are living in a democracy, I think voting is a right that we have to influence a lot of those decisions, and we need to participate. So we cannot be away from that. And keep in mind that we hear also in the news that some people try to influence elections in countries through the use of technology, the bad use of technology. So this is nothing new. And we as citizens, we should be vocal about this. But then I don't want anybody to be depressed, but go to the example of the cell phone again. We accept conditions in using an application that we may not have an alternative for. So if my health provider sends me an application with all good intentions and I accept all the data rights that they have whenever I install and use, what can I do? So certainly there are spaces for forums. And I saw in the questions and comments this idea of sandboxes also that might be very useful for businesses to gather people around the local context that matters. But at the same time, even if you look at the European Union, finding companies that are mostly from the United States, like what happened with Google, Apple, Microsoft, to name the top giants in technology that will probably still lead in the AI revolution, and they are leading as of today, is not enough when you think about the European Union. And again, go back to the democratic principles. There will be elections for the European Parliament. Is this in the agenda that people are discussing? Because at the same time, technology and AI will have an impact on defense. So we have to see that we have a conflict running in Europe. Is the technology front away from this? It doesn't seem to be. So again, the implications are for the longer term. The same way we can discuss sustainability and we can stay our whole lives discussing an utopian concept. But the question is, what can we do in the short term to ensure that we have a better future? This is at stake now. And I think small forums, local forums that can gather and create that kind of power of scrutinizing what's available and find alternatives. Because let me give you another example between the US and Europe. In the US, people are discussing, banning TikTok, a provider from China. But still, I can buy on Amazon a scale to manage my weight, or a smartwatch to be managing my exercise. And some of those appliances will actually connect to data sources in China. And there's nobody talking about that. Those are the small startups that I mentioned that are also getting a lot of capital to innovate within artificial intelligence. So in one way, as citizens, we need to do what we can to be in forums where these discussions are happening and participate in the decision making. And again, the election is the ultimate moment for us to participate and have a say.
I was wondering, and if you would like to have a take on this issue, on precisely this issue that Luís has been sharing about, and perhaps joining this last question, or if it makes sense to consider the hypothesis of stopping AI for a time, so that we can think deeply about the impacts of AI. So would that be a thing? So maybe first, if you want react on what Luís has just shared on our power as citizens to be part of protecting against the risks. You're mute, and yeah.
I think that Luís is right that individuals have to exercise not only their rights, but see it as a responsibility. So voting is certainly a first way to do that. I find myself imagining that individuals and institutions could also start to bring their power to bear economically and as investors. So we've seen a fair number of things work effectively. People wanted to divest, for example, from fossil fuel companies in terms of supporting the environment. And then there's become other standards around boardroom diversity, for example, and people want to only invest in companies that are diversifying their boards. So BlackRock and other large institutional investors have put in new criteria for the companies that they hold in their funds. So I find myself wondering if we won't see a similar movement in the investment community around responsible technology use. In other words, companies who have either committed to following certain standards, whether it's the ISO standards, the NIST framework, which one's going to emerge as sort of the gold standard for that kind of, for people to consider as the best that can be held out. That's why we created a set of practices so that companies could say, well, regardless of what the framework is, we, the company, are going to develop our own practices and our own framework to demonstrate that we're serious about developing technology responsibly. So anyway, I think watching the investment space will be interesting to see in terms of whether some movement emerges there around choices that investors can make. And I think startups are thinking about that in Silicon Valley. We are developing also at the Markkula Center a tool. My colleague, Tracy Barba, who works in the area of venture equity ethics, is developing a tool so that in the due diligence that investors do, venture capitalists do, to look at AI systems that are in startups that they might invest in, that there's a set of questions that they can be asking to try and get at how effectively a startup is managing their AI systems to be responsible and to not create harms in society. As far as the last question about how reasonable is it to imagine a global pause, if you will, I mean, I think we've seen that hasn't happened, that even though some very high profile people like Elon Musk and others came out and said, we should stop for a while, that was people, suspected, were suspicious about the intentions of that. Was that really to pause so that we could all implement the technology safely, or was it just to get a leg up on competitors? And so there's this sort of level of mistrust in there. But I think that we need to be listening to that. Just the fact that people who have inside knowledge around the potential and the power of this technology are expressing concerns about it tells us that we need to be handling this one maybe a little bit differently. I agree with Luís that it's like electricity in terms of its pervasiveness, but maybe it's a little bit different from electricity in terms of the harm it can do.
Pedro, what about the voice of the consumer or of the citizen in all the regulation building processes? So is there a room for the participation in what you have seen, or that is something for those that really know about tech and AI and the lawyers and politicians?
As Luís said, I think the citizens can choose the future of AI with their votes, of course. I would add that they choose also with their wallets, kind of going with what Anna said. So they have these two powerful weapons. But one important aspect here is awareness to what AI is and the risks they pose. And I think this is a fundamental, I would say, flaw, is the fact that when we try to converse with people about AI, there's this lack of knowledge, and namely lack of the imminence of the dangers. Because one thing is a physical danger, being hit by a car. Another thing is having this artificial intelligence entity that gains free will and may destroy humankind or disrupt critical services. So education and awareness, I think, is paramount in terms of having true participation of individuals in the future of AI. And to this moment, I don't think we have reached this point. But even with awareness, I wonder whether people would be interested enough in having this active participation. I say this because of this privacy paradox that we witness. People know that their data is being used to train AI, but regardless of knowing this, people still provide their data to this huge tech companies, right? So they know that the risk is there. They know that the data is being used, but easiness of use and of this platforms, the social networks, leads people to neglect the dangers. One example or that we saw this happening was the use of tools in which people uploaded their faces, their pictures, in order to have deepfakes. And so we saw a lot of tools in the App Store and Google Play Store where they uploaded their photos, and there's companies, they use these photos to train data and provide a video or a deepfake image. So for 5 minutes of fun, people are willing to give their data. So this is another problem.
I wonder if any of you want to react to this, Luís and Anne. I was thinking that one of the big problems, in fact, is not knowing, is ignorance. So it's very difficult for the common people to really understand the dangers. And how can we work with that? Because I imagine that if more people were aware of the risks, they take every time that they use their phone and the new app and so on. And as you said, Luís, most of us don't have time or even the technical capacity to understand what the information in the app really means. So isn't part of the problem the lack of knowledge and the speed with which AI is evolving and being included in all the things that we use?
I think there's this, I've talked about the accountability gap, the idea that broadly people are expressing the fact that they're not comfortable with AI. We see that in all the surveys, we see that in the media coverage, we hear that sort of high level anxiety in society about it. But then how they translate that to their individual responsibility. So there's not only an accountability gap for the corporations, but for the individuals too. And so I think there is a consumer education effort that needs to happen on, the point that Pedro is making for 5 minutes of fun, should you be giving up the picture of your face, but also, as you're having that same 5 minutes of fun, how much water and energy are you using with that AI system to start having people become aware of the implications of their choices for other societal concerns that we have around the environment. And companies are starting to respond to that. A few of the big players, Google and Microsoft, have announced recently smaller AI systems that use less energy. So I think where the concerns do get elevated, they know they need to be responsive to that in the marketplace, because it's not sustainable to have AI using the water and energy use at the levels that it is right now. That'll harm the environment. And I think not enough people have been talking about that. So you can see where once we did start talking about that as an ethical concern, that the companies will react to that. I think we need to keep talking about customer user accountability as well, so that the consumer starts to learn how their own behaviors can influence the marketplace.
If I can add, and I think you had an example in Portugal recently where a company was paying a certain amount to photograph the iris of local citizens. So if you think about that, it's beyond the example that Pedro gave, because people know that the iris can be uniquely identified. So, and this is being used whenever you travel and you cross some of the electronic gates around the world. And I had a personal instance in the Middle East where, to leave a certain country, I had to photograph my iris. Otherwise, I wouldn't leave. When you are faced with something like that, what can you say? It's the local authority that is telling you, this is the only way you get out of my country. So that's not nice, and it's happening today. So, but when you go to the massive example of the number of people that were actually photographing the iris and giving it away to this company without knowing what they would use it for. So that's unbelievable. But then this is not only about AI. We need to go back to the layer of technology where we know about a lot of cases with underage minors getting into platforms like Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all others, without having the minimum age within the terms and conditions to install and use those applications. And in a lot of cases, parents don't have any power to enforce this, or even in some cases, it's the user that will say that they are within the age range and they use the application anyway. And a lot of these companies, even in the US, they have been called into Congress to respond of that responsibility that they have. And they are the same companies. When you think about the volume and the size, they are the same companies that will probably have a dominant role within AI. So we still didn't solve that kind of issue in technology, where there are very specific regulatory environments where they shouldn't have any doubt on how to behave. We are just saying that with AI, this can become exponential and at a level where people ultimately may lose control, in kind of the Terminator analogy that Pedro brought as well. I think one thing is seeing the results in our daily life, the way we can improve productivity, the way our life becomes easier in a very fast-paced environment. The other thing is the trade-offs. Again, whenever we use certain technology, we know that we are facing certain risks. There's no technology without zero risk. That it's something that will always be on the table.
Thank you. I wonder if any of you want to share a reflection on any different issue from the ones we've been discussing.
Just to mention sorry, Anne.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Pedro.
I was going to mention the deepfakes. I think there's a question on this matter, and I think it's important to say that in the negotiations of the EU Act, we almost witnessed a full stop on the enactment of the act, because some of the member states defended that there shouldn't be any regulation of the so-called general purpose AI systems that can be used to create media content, photos, videos, etc. So what was attained was a compromise, a political compromise, and some of the providers of these systems that can be used to create AI deepfakes, they have to obey or perform certain duties that are in the EU Act. But regardless of the EU Act, there's a huge community of open source tools that can be used to create AI deepfakes. Not only deepfakes, but also kind of tools analogous to the ChatGPT. We can all have a kind of a ChatGPT installed in our laptops, and some of these ChatGPTs are uncensored or not aligned properly with ethical concerns. I got a hold of one of these models, and last night I was trying the model and asked the model, how can I build a bomb using household items? And the model said which items I could use, and kind of a recipe step by step on how to build explosives. So there's a huge problem regarding the dissemination of these tools that can lead to very, very serious damages. So I think it is important also to think about this dissemination of open source tools without any proper alignment with ethical concerns.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think alignment's an important topic. And I think back to the education of consumers, there are choices. So you don't have to use ChatGPT. There are other systems out there. And Anthropic has developed a chat, Claude, another AI system. And they are using a slightly different or a very different approach, constitutional AI, where they're trying to give the AI system that they're developing a set of rules and principles to follow. And I don't know that it's perfect. I don't know that it wouldn't also generate the instructions on how to build a bomb, but I know that they're trying to prevent that kind of information from coming forward, and they're giving very specific rules, and they're drawing on guidelines that already exist, so that you start again to see some coalescence around some norms in the industry. But the consumer has to choose to use Claude over ChatGPT and sort of be aware of what those distinctions are. And so I think we need to continue with providing them with those distinctions and sort of doing that education. But the other thing that deepfakes raise for me is this just fundamental level issue around trust. And particularly when I think about the younger generation and young people who are growing up, who are going to grow up in a world that has deepfakes, their degree of cynicism has got to, move right along, because what can they trust, right? What can they, if they can't even tell the difference between what's real and what's not real, it starts to allow for poor decision-making, across the board. So I think we need to be thinking about deepfakes, yes, as a technical problem that needs to be solved, but also as another way that is going to fuel mistrust. And the last thing I would just say in terms of topics to raise is just to encourage those of you in Europe to continue to play the leadership role that I think you've played. I mean, Europe is ahead of the United States when it comes to ethics, or ethics versus compliance. You've thought about ethics longer, and you've been using it more thoughtfully than we have in the United States. And I think you see the EU ability to, the Brussels effect, the ability to set regulation that then global technology companies have to adhere to because they do business in Europe. So I wouldn't, don't back off of that. If anything, lean into that and continue to give the world that leadership because it's necessary.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anne. That's an interesting advice and challenge and encouragement, I would say. Encouragement is the better words. Of course, that as Pedro shared before, there's the trade of innovation, and so if you regulate too much, there's a cost for that, and that's part of the equation also. So before closing, we're getting very close to 1 minute to close. I would say I would invite you to share a very positive note on AI and what AI can contribute to humanity. And I would say another thoughts on precaution and risk that concerns you particularly regarding AI. So what would be the most positive and interesting thing that you see that AI can contribute to? And then what is the most difficult, concerning risk associated with AI? I hope it's
so. I can go first since I talked about the dangers, and there's a layer that we didn't discuss that is also an opportunity, which is splitting the tools and the technology in itself with the databases. The databases can be somewhat more local. This gives control to a group of people to actually handle their data processed by those tools. So we still benefit from the technology effect, but we handle the data that is behind it. And if you think about education, we are facing a risk that the data that is available is the wrong data. And we don't know if we are processing and producing results that will be biased. And that's an ethical issue as well that particularly the education system is now discussing. So the good thing is when you look at healthcare, nobody will think that AI won't benefit the whole advancement of the systems by predicting cancer, for example. We have a lot of evidence that this is beneficial to society. The point is, I don't want my data, personal data, to be vulnerable within those systems that suddenly this comes out and my insurance company will raise my insurance premium because of that. So that's the cautious note. But I think this idea of local databases can be also a great advantage for people to organize in smaller forums to make sure that they are not exposed to the global trends.
Thank you. Thank you, Luís.
My example would also have been healthcare. I've had both experiences lately. Recently, a dentist who said, "Oh, I think you have a cavity," because the AI picked it up on the screen, and we never would have seen this before, but now we can see this tiny little microscopic thing well before it becomes a problem. But then I've also had my healthcare data breached. My local doctor, in the healthcare system where we are, both my information and my children's information was, accessed in a data leak. And there has been no accountability for that healthcare system for doing that, and very little media coverage around it. And they're one of the largest healthcare providers here in Northern California. So it's not like they're a small company that people couldn't know about. So I see both the upside potential in the area of health, and I also see the great risk there. But I think the bigger risk is the one I touched on earlier, which is, people losing trust and faith in what's real. And particularly for young people to grow up in that world. I'm very intrigued, and Luís will follow up to learn more about the work you're doing around AI in education, because I think it's going to be critical to the next generation to figure out how they can have the level of trust that is needed in institutions and in leaders in order for society to function if they're growing up in an environment where they can't tell what's real.
I would add, not to be a doomers, but that's one of the risks I see is the possibility of some companies being, or some scientists being blinded by the advancement of scientific the advancement of AI, and maybe when they become aware that maybe they have gone too far, maybe that's too late to do anything about it. So that's why it is important to have these safeguards in the development and of these systems, and not wait for something to happen to then try to do something after the harm has been done.
Mm. Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your excellent participation. It was a very interesting panel, I think, and I hope all of you enjoyed. Helena, I know that you wanted to share something about the collective book. Do you want to share the slides, or? So that's goodbye on my side. Thank you very much. So Helena, shall I? Okay, I can share some information about these for those of you that are Portuguese, because this is a collective book. The Forum has been producing collective books about the main themes that are discussed throughout the year, and the next collective book is devoted to the artificial intelligence theme. It's called, the title is Os Desafios Éticos da Inteligência Artificial na Minha Vida Profissional São e Irão Ser. Portanto, under the theme of artificial intelligence, the invitation for you is, if you wish to share what are your challenges in your professional life regarding artificial intelligence. So you can submit a small text under your name or anonymously until the 31st of August of this year to this email, forumetica.cpbs.ucpp.pt, and you're more than welcome to participate, and we will be on this side reading your texts and working on the book. Thank you so much. So Helena, do you want to say a final goodbye? Yeah.
Only a final goodbye. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Pedro and Luís, and thank you also, Conceição. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.